Hey, it's your friend Choice CJ here, and welcome to my draft analysis for UBL Season Number 2. UBL is the Ultimate Battle League, and this is a league that is new to me. I was not in it for Season 1, but I did apply to get into Season 2, and I'm very grateful to have been accepted. So big thanks to Deebs, Hera, Automatic, those guys for accepting me, and all the rest of the folks on the council. I'm really excited for this season. There's a lot of really great coaches in the league this season. Uzi Gunner is returning as the champion from last season, and he and I have overlapped in GBA and some TTM stuff, so happy to be going off against him. Some other good friends like Deebs and Leo are in the league. There's some big names like Steve, aka Magnitude, and A-Drive as well that are in this season of UBL. So I'm really excited to face off versus all of them, and of course I'm excited to meet all of the coaches who I'm not as familiar with. It's always good to sort of branch out and meet some new folks, because you never know who might be a master Fortnite player. That's pretty much how I get up my squads these days. So really looking forward to it. We're going to just hop right on into a discussion on the format, and then we will talk about my team, starting with our round 1 pick, of course. So UBL is a 16-team league, so it's a pretty average size. The draft format is tier-based, so it's not point-based like we've seen in some other recent drafts, like MPL is closer to a GBA style. It's, 1 tier 1, 1 tier 2, 2 tier 3s, tier 4, tier 5, a mega pick, and then you have 4 extra slots that you use a 400-point budget to draft with. So if you've watched almost any draft league content, I'm sure you're familiar with this style of draft. One thing that's really interesting about UBL this season is that they lowered a lot of different Pokemon into lower tiers than what you would normally see. And that's going to go into my initial draft strategy quite a bit, actually. We ended up with the 6th overall pick out of 16, so relatively early, which is nice. We're not going to be able to get our hands on things like Tapu Koko or Zygarde or whatever, but we can still get some pretty good picks. Anything else that really needs to be discussed? No, not really. That's kind of all the normal stuff. So, like I mentioned, a lot of Pokemon that are usually in like a tier above were brought down one. So, for example, like Gothitelle is usually in tier 1 if it has Shadow Tag, but in this draft it's actually tier 2. And so I wanted to have a draft strategy to potentially abuse that. I wanted to get them on in round 1 that could combo really well with Gothitelle in round 2. And so I came up with an initial draft strategy of Mega Lopunny plus Gothitelle plus Scizor. So the reason that would be a nice core is that Gothitelle can trap Psychics and Fairies extremely well, which are the 2 most annoying types to Lopunny, because those types of Pokemon like to run Rocky Helmet versus Lopunny in order to counter it. But if you have Gothitelle, those Pokemon are going to be either pressured to run Shed Shell instead of Rocky Helmet, thus paving the way for Lopunny, or they're going to run the Rocky Helmet like intended, and then I can easily trap them with Gothitelle, trick a Scarf onto them, and then set up for days. So that was the initial thought process there. Scizor is also a really good partner because it threatens offensively those 2 typings very well. And it also has Pursuit to additionally annoy Psychics. It has Defog for deterring hazard setup and things like that. So that's what I'm going into round 1 intending to get. So we do take Mega Lopunny round 1. Mega Lopunny is going to be nicknamed Bell this season, and I'm really excited to have Lopunny back on the team. I've not used Lopunny in a full season since all the way back in UBC Season 3, which was over 2 years ago now. So that's crazy. We used it briefly in a Token Minorities tournament last summer. I think it was Summer Showdown last year that I used it. So really eager to have this back on the team because it's so good at what it does. Besides maybe Tapu Koko, there's not a better revenge killer in the game / better late game cleaner in the game. Because it obviously has unresisted dual stab, thanks to its ability Scrappy. Ghost types can't even deal with it. And it also has some cheeky options for support, like Healing Wish, Encore, Baton Pass, Cosmic Power, things like that. So it does have a little bit of diversity in its sets, not much. Like most of the time, the best sets that you're going to use with it are just dual stab revenge killing sets. But there can be some cool things that you can do with Lopunny. So that's going to be our round 1 pick, and we're going to be looking to round 2 now. Unfortunately, my good buddy Leo, 6-foot hacks, ended up grabbing Gothitelle at the end of round 2. Or sorry, at the start of round 2, because he had the wheel, so he went with Clefable Gothitelle. Really nasty core on its own. It's going to be very good. I think he's going to have a very good season. So I had to sort of reevaluate my plan. And so I couldn't get, I could have like gotten tier 5 Wobbuffet or something like that, but I think Wobbuffet's kind of bad, to be honest. So I figured I would just get a good Psychic type that could sort of replace Gothitelle, not in terms of its trapping utility, but in terms of its other utility of being like a Calm Mind Sweeper and having other utility. And so Necrozma struck me as a Pokemon that would have a lot of that utility, because it has a really good support move pool. It's got Rocks, Knockoff, Thunder Wave, things like that. It's a really awesome setup mon in terms of like Calm Mind, Autotomize, Rock Polish, Swords Dance, things like that. Really, really nice. It's one of the bulkiest Psychic types that there are, besides maybe Cresselia. Like Cresselia has better stats, but Necrozma has a better ability in terms of like giving it additional bulk. The fact that Prism Armor reduces super effective damage is really nice. Levitate, of course, is a good ability on Cresselia's end, but I really like Prism Armor. Necrozma, I think I mentioned this. If I didn't, I'll say it again. It gets Knockoff, which is really great, because, like I mentioned, Rocky Helmet is an annoying thing for Lopunny, so if I can knock those off, that's pretty excellent. And yeah, I thought that taking this Pokemon as well would be really nice for Lopunny, because now my opponents cannot use Necrozma as a check to Lopunny. It's one of the best checks that there is. Things like Cresselia, Reuniclus, Mew are also very good. So there's one less available option for dealing with Lopunny. And yeah, that pretty much sums it up for Necrozma. Necrozma is going to be named Igor, because it's like a good sort of Scandinavian Russian name. I don't know. Everyone likes to say Necrozma, like, with a Russian accent or whatever. So, going to be a really good member of the team for sure. So, I decided to go with Necrozma over Scizor, because I thought Scizor might fall to round 3. But unfortunately, it got immediately sniped with the next pick, with Root taking it in round 2. So, I was very, very sad to see Scizor go. I was thinking about pairing Scizor with my next pick anyway. So I thought that I would just go ahead and pick up Heatran in round 3, aka Vesuvius. Heatran is nice because its typing allows it to switch in on Psychics and Fairies pretty well. And like I said, I'm trying to prioritize dealing with those Mons quite a bit in order to support Lopunny dealing, revenge killing stuff. So everyone kind of knows what Heatran does. It's very bulky. It sets up rocks, goes for taunt, Will-O-Wisp, whatever you'd like. What I think is very underrated about Heatran is it's got base 130 special attack, which is very, very good. Like, it's as powerful as, like, Volcarona and things like that. It's just so strong. So I want to use offensive Heatran quite a bit this season if I can. And, the fact that I have 2 rockers now, and hopefully I can get another rocker in a few rounds, means that Heatran won't always be pressured to bring rocks. So that's quite nice. Yeah, Heatran is just such a good defensive Pokemon. And obviously it is 4 times weak to ground, which makes it a little bit tricky. Because you have to run Shuca Berry or Air Balloon a lot of weeks. But I think that our team that we've drafted can support Heatran and help mitigate its 4 times weakness a little bit. And so the next Pokemon that we drafted actually I think does that pretty well, supporting Heatran while also just providing general support, and that is Togekiss. So Togekiss is going to be nicknamed Wayne. This is a throwback to Orange League Season 2 when I had a core of Togekiss and Jirachi. I didn't draft that team, I inherited that team, but we decided to nickname both of those Mons Wayne and Garth as a shout out to Wayne's World. And so Wayne is finally back on the squad for the first time in like 2.5 years, which is pretty awesome. And so when people think of Togekiss, they usually think of like the Paraflinch sets, and those are certainly certainly a viable set. But Togekiss has so much more of like a utility than just that. It's really good offensively, because 120 base special attack is really nice. It can run like Trick Scarf sets, which are really good. It can run setup sets, which are really good. You can even combo it with Baton Pass, so that I can pass like Nasty Plot into something like Necrozma, for example. So that's really great. Togekiss is a really nice wish passer. It's got a pretty decent base 85 HP stat, so it can give reasonably sized wishes to different members of my team. And that's really important for something like Heatran, because Heatran obviously doesn't have any reliable recovery on its own. It just mostly relies on leftovers. But if I'm going to be pressured to bring Shuca Berry on Heatran a lot of weeks, I want to have something that can potentially wish it up, because that would be quite useful. So, Fairy type in general is just so important for dealing with dragons and fightings and things like that. Togekiss in particular, I think, is great with Heatran because in addition to being able to heal it up with Wish, the fact that I'm a Fairy type that is immune to ground, Heatran's main weakness, I think is really good. But yeah, Fairies, I just wanted to get an early Fairy because there's never enough to go around. So that pretty much sums it up for Togekiss. Really happy to have this on the team. So with my next pick, I wanted a Pursuit Trapper because I haven't gotten a Pursuit Trapper yet. I was actually looking at Weavile in round 4, but ended up getting taken by Steve. Really nice pickup on his end. So had to go with a more budget option and pick up Gilthunder, my Sneasel. So this is a shout out to Gilthunder from 7 Deadly Sins. I thought that was an appropriate name because he's sort of the underling to Meliodas. And Meliodas is the name that I gave my Weavile in whatever recent season I had it in. UBC season 5 or 6. It's hard to keep track of all the damn seasons. But Sneasel is really nice. It doesn't have a huge attack stat, but that's very misleading because you give it a Life Orb and you consider the fact that its dual stabs are almost unresisted, and nothing like switching in on this thing. And so it's, you could say it's one-dimensional, but it's just so good at what it does because it hits really hard. And Sneasel in particular, like I said, it has Pursuit, so it can support Lopunny in that way. And since Sneasel and Lopunny both share checks in the terms of fairies, I can use Sneasel to weaken the fairies or to knock off their helmets, and then that will clear the way for Lopunny to 2-hit KO them in the late game. So that's what I'm thinking with Sneasel. It also fulfills a really nice speed tier on my team. I've only got one other Mon above base 100 at the moment, being Lopunny. So Sneasel's a really nice option, in my opinion. The next Pokemon I wasn't intending on taking at all, but I noticed that it was in Tier 3, which I thought was a ridiculously good value. And I thought, this would actually be a really nice partner for Lopunny when you think about it, even though at first glance it might seem redundant. So that Pokemon is Breloom, and that's going to be Shrew Manchu. The reason that Breloom is really nice is because Lopunny doesn't like to be the primary answer to Pokemon like Chansey or Blissey or Miltank or Porygon 2 or things like that. You want your Lopunny to be able to just come in and revenge kill. It doesn't want to be the Pokemon that pressures normals and steals and things like that. So having a second fighting type on the team I think is actually really nice. For that reason. And Breloom is a great pick because it's a really freaking strong fighting type. It's got base 130 attack, and that combos with two really good abilities. First being Technician, giving it boosts on moves like Mach Punch, Bullet Seed, Force Palm, Rock Tomb, things like that. Just, really giving it some really powerful moves. And then Poison Heal is also really amazing. It turns Breloom into a pretty good defensive Pokemon. We saw Jolt in GBA Season 8 use Breloom as a check for Zygarde, which is pretty wild. And so I might have to do something like that. I don't have really amazing Thousand Arrows switch-ins on my team. I just have to rely on my general bulk, I would say. So yeah, Breloom is looking really fierce on this team. I think I've got pretty good priority up to this point on the squad, if I do say so myself. We've got Fake Out Quick Attack on Lopunny, Ice Shard on Sneasel, which, by the way, that's extremely important and extremely valuable for me in general. I like having Ice Shard to deal with all of the dragons and all the land OTs and things like that. Then we've got one of the most powerful priority moves in the game being Mach Punch on Breloom, so really liking how that's shaping up. So now let's go into our next pick, and that was Druddigon. So Druddigon I thought was going to be a nice budget option down in Tier 4. It's a good rocker, it's got a lot of good bulk, and it has a bunch of really good abilities, actually. So I think Rough Skin is the thing that most people associate with Druddigon. Makes it a really good check to physical fire types. physical grass types, things like that. But don't sleep on offensive sets with Sheer Force or Mold Breaker. Like, those can potentially be really good as well. Because, yeah, they're just so... it combos off of a base 120 attack stat, which is actually really good. And this thing gets pretty good coverage, like Fire Punch and, whatever else. Gunk Shot that are all boosted by Sheer Force. So, like, Gunk Shot with Sheer Force will definitely do a lot of damage to fairies, which is pretty nice. I think Pure Dragon is one of the best types in the game, just because it has so many resistances. That's why I've loved using Pokemon like Goodra in the past. But Goodra ended up not being available here, and I didn't really have the points for it anyway, so I think Druddigon is a pretty good option. Next up, we do have... Oh, by the way, Druddigon is nicknamed Kanye because it's a mother effing monster. And so it felt appropriate to name it after Kanye. Next up, we do have Heliolisk, which is nicknamed Super Lizard. Nice and creative. It's actually a summer camp song, Super Lizard. So Heliolisk kind of looks like a lizard, so we nicknamed it Super Lizard. Heliolisk is something I really wanted because it's one of the few electric types that actually gets U-turn. And that's so valuable. Like, I can't overstate enough how valuable having that is. Because it kind of invalidates using ground types as a check. Because then you can U-turn into whatever wants to threaten them. Switch into Breloom, because Breloom is obviously a really nice way of dealing with ground types. Just the ability to not have your momentum stopped by ground types is so amazing. I can't state that enough. And so, other than that, it also has a nice speed tier, a fairly good special attack stat, not too high at 109. But this thing just has an amazing move pool. Like, it's almost Thundy tier in terms of how good its move pool is. Focus Blast, Surf, Grass Knot, Signal Beam, etc., etc., Dark Pulse. So, just so many different options. It's going to be hard for my opponents to find movesets that can prevent Heliolisk from sweeping. And it even gets Glare. Actually, I have 2 Pokemon team with Glare, which is definitely the best move for Paralysis, because it can paralyze ground types, and it, what am I trying to say? It's 100% accurate. So, really like that utility as well. It's going to be pretty cheeky. I think it could definitely come in handy. It even gets Quick Attack. It gets Stab Quick Attack, which is pretty hilarious. Having another normal type to pair with Lopunny I think is really useful, because they do share some common checks. So, next on my team, I wanted something with Toxic Spikes, and I also wanted something that could absorb Toxic Spikes. And so, for that reason, Venomoth ended up being the perfect mon in this slot. It also fulfills a really good speed tier for me at base 90. So right now, I've got 135, 115, 109, and then down to 90. And then my next fastest is Togekiss at 80. And so having something at that 90 to go between Togekiss at 80 and Heliolisk at 109 is really nice, because it should force Timid and Jolly Natures from a lot of Pokemon in that range. I think there's like very few Pokemon that can afford to run Modest or Adamant versus me. But yeah, Venomoth has those support options like I mentioned. It also is just a really it's a very scary setup sweeper on its own, having access to Sleep Powder and Quiver Dance, being quite nice. It has both U-turn and Baton Pass for good like Volt Turn action, good momentum action. And yeah, that's most of how I feel about Venomoth. It's not the bulkiest thing, so I'm not super thrilled about using it as a switch into fairy types. I do feel a little vulnerable to fairies in general, because I'm pretty reliant on Heatran to deal with that. Maybe there's some transactions we can make later in the season to alleviate that. But what I'm hoping is that between Venomoth and Lopunny and Breloom, we can just apply enough pressure to fairies that they're not going to be too scary offensively. But yeah, that's most of my thoughts on Venomoth. Our next pick, oh, by the way, Venomoth is named Holly after the Rainbow Butterfly from Dark Cloud 2, if you're familiar with that game. Obviously, Venomoth is not a butterfly, but you kind of have to work with what you've got, okay? We're doing the best we have with nicknames. Next up, we do have our Z Crystal. We actually went with Poisonium Z, which was a little bit controversial as we were doing the draft, because there were some people who wanted Poison Z and didn't quite see how it fit on my team. They thought maybe Bug Z would fit better. The thing with Bugsy is that it's really only usable on Venomoth. Nothing else on my team really likes having poison or having Bugsy all that much. And if I were to use Bugsy, it would pretty much allow Venomoth to break through steals, which are annoying for Venomoth, of course. But I don't really need help breaking through steals. I have a Heatran, I have 2 fighting types, and I'm about to draft 2 ground types. So didn't really think it was necessary to have the Bugsy. With Poison Z, at least I can potentially slap this on Pokemon like Druddigon and Sneasel. And even if I only do that once throughout the season, like that's probably good enough. Makes it worth it for drafting the Poison Z over something like Bugsy. But yeah, that's the thought process there. Don't think everyone 100% agreed with it, but that's fine with me. Really, we should be blaming the system. The system of drafting like singular Z crystals is pretty bad, in my humble opinion. It's not like it's gonna ruin the league or anything. I'm still really excited for the experience, but I think strictly speaking that like making specific Pokemon a Z crystal user is much better. But I'll digress from that and talk about my second to last pick, which is going to be Milton the Quagsire. And so I didn't have a water type up to this point. I don't think that in general, like fulfilling cores for the sake of fulfilling cores is really important. So I wasn't I wasn't too worried about getting a really good water type because I already have awesome checks for fire types, being Druddigon and Heatran, and then other annoying types like water can be annoying. It's nice to have a water type to switch into waters. Quagsire can help with that because it does have water absorb, and it's worth mentioning too that Heliolisk does have dry skin, so it allows that as well. And it's also a ground type, which I don't have on my team up to this point. My next 2 picks, like I said, are all both ground types. But yeah, like the Quagsire is just a pretty good mon on its own in Tier 5. And it's seen a lot of use in OU, in Smogon, to be honest, on like stall teams because of its ability Unaware. And so I think Unaware is a really great, really great option for Quagsire. It prevents me from losing to very, very dangerous setup sweepers. I can use this versus potentially like a Zygarde 50 or something like that. And it's got enough physical bulk to make that work out. It's got base 85 defense and base 95 HP, so that's quite good. Yeah, and then it even has some cheeky options like Curse, which allows it to be a setup threat. And it's got Recover for reliable recovery. So Quagsire, I think, is pretty solid. I was pretty happy to get this. Now I have my own ground type to prevent Volt Switch shenanigans. And then last but not least, we have Daisy Dukes, the Diggersby. I've been waiting all draft to take this mon. I've been wanting this ever since my initial strategy got ruined with Gothitelle and Scizor. I thought this would be one of the next best things for my team because it's a really good breaker for pairing with Lopunny. And it's got just a really nice move pool, lots of coverage. It's got U-turn. It's even got Spikes, which is pretty awesome. Spikes on Diggersby, I think, is really cool because Diggersby is a Pokemon that forces switches. So you actually get a fair number of free opportunities for setting up Spikes. If you are a fan of Chimpack, you'll say there's no such thing as like free rocks, free spikes, but it's pretty close with Diggersby, I think. So I think this is going to be an awesome member of the team. Really excited to use it. And yeah, we named it Daisy Dukes, mostly just because like Diggersby's got those ears that look like fists. So it's like putting up its dukes, so to speak. And then the idea of like Daisy Dukes, with her boots that are made for walking and everything, it's just so funny to name such like an ugly Pokemon Daisy Duke. But Jessica Simpson might be a little offended by that, but I thought it was pretty funny, so we're doing it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to complete my draft analysis for UBL Season 2. I tried to go through it as quickly as I can. I actually recorded this previously, and it was like a little longer than 30 minutes, and I don't like having super long draft analyses, but this is still going to end up being like 25 minutes, so c'est la vie. We are going to be having our Week 1 match go up next week versus Frosted. Definitely recommend you guys check her out. She's been getting into Draft League pretty recently, but has also been doing a lot of VGC on her channel for some time, so it's a good place to watch Pokemon content. And, of course, all of the coaches' information is going to be down in the description below. So make sure you sub to all the coaches so that way you don't miss out on any UBL action. So that's going to do it for me, ladies and gents. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out my channel for other gaming and Pokemon content. And until the next time, I'll see you guys later.